I really enjoy working in my shop. It lets me get away from the stresses and the aggravations of the daily grind for some much needed downtime and relaxation. So I often take on a project simply for the enjoyment of doing it. And this is one of those projects. I've got some future project ideas in mind for my milling machine that are going to require some compressed air, but I don't have enough connection points with my current setup. Right now I have one dedicated line for an air hose, one for my power drawbar, and one for the lift assist air cylinder underneath the table of the milling machine. In this video I'm going to be making a manifold with 5 quick connect couplings to give me some extra connection points for those future projects. I decided to use this piece of aluminum that I had laying around to make the main body of the manifold. It's about 1 inch thick, 2 3/8 inches wide, and about 6.5 inches long. And with the stock clamped-in device, I didn't have enough room for the first drilling operation. Even with the table all the way down and the drill as far up inside the chuck as I could get it, I still needed about 3/4 of an inch of clearance to get the drill over the part. I didn't have a collet that would fit the 7/16 inch drill, so I had to come up with an alternate plan of action. Now with this project, absolute precision wasn't necessary. So I bolted these clamping dogs to the table and squared them up using a carpenter's square. I just needed a rigid and relatively square surface to which to clamp the part for drilling. It wasn't until I started editing this video that I realized I could have just cut the aluminum block a little shorter. Now you may be thinking, why not just buy a manifold instead of going through the trouble of making one? After all, you can buy a comparable unit online for about $20 with the fittings included. And in all fairness, that's a valid point from an economic perspective. I spent about $15 for a 1/4 inch NPT drill and tap kit, and about another $20 or so for quick connect fittings. So yeah, I could have saved a little bit of money by buying one ready-made. But that wasn't the point with this project. Like I said earlier, working in my shop is a way for me to relieve stress, and this project actually provided a learning experience for me. Before this project, I had never tapped a hole with an NPT thread. NPT threads are slightly tapered to facilitate an airtight or watertight seal. And though it wasn't much different from a straight thread, I had to make sure that I didn't tap the hole too deep. If it was tapped too deep, I would run out of threads on the male fitting before obtaining a proper seal. So I ran the tap down to what I thought would be a good depth, and then I measured the distance from the surface of the aluminum to the bottom of the tap handle. Then I checked the fit with one of the connectors. Now had this not been tapped deep enough, I could simply tap the hole a little bit deeper, take a new measurement, and check the fit. But it turned out I got a pretty good fit the first time, so I used this depth measurement for tapping the rest of the holes in the manifold. With the first hole drilled and tapped, I flipped the block over and repeated the previous operations. This second hole connects with the first one to form one continuous hole all the way through the block. Now, the holes didn't line up perfectly concentric with one another, but for this project, that's really not a problem because it doesn't cause any functional issues with the manifold. With the through hole complete, I set the part up so that I can drill and tap the holes for the quick connect fittings on the bottom. The first hole is spaced 1 inch from the side of the block, and the remaining holes are spaced 1.5 inches apart. I set the quill stop so that the drill goes down about 1 1/8 inches deep. This puts the point of the drill right near the bottom of the through hole. Now I find it extremely satisfying when I can do something myself instead of having to depend on someone else or pay someone else to do it. And most of the time I do things myself to save the money or to make sure it's done exactly how I want it done. And though this particular project didn't really save me any money, the therapeutic value of just getting out and working in the shop was well worth the extra few dollars that I would have saved buying something online and waiting for it to arrive. After applying a generous amount of Teflon tape to all of the threaded studs, I begin the assembly process. I start out by connecting the hose to the male quick connect fitting. This will attach to one of the existing connections behind the machine to supply air to the manifold. Next, I install 4 of the quick connects along the bottom of the block and 1 on the end. Then I finish it up by connecting the hose to the opposite end. With everything assembled, I attach the manifold to the wall, using a piece of 1/4-inch plywood as a spacer to give a little more clearance for manipulating the connectors. I disconnect the power drawbar from the main air line and connect it to the new manifold. Then I connect the manifold to the main air line. Well, that should take care of my compressed air needs at the milling machine, at least for the foreseeable future. And it'll be a nice memento for years to come of a relaxing afternoon spent in the shop. I'm Theobald Hedman. Thanks for watching Southern Ingenuity.